Marvel's latest film, The Eternals, just came out on Friday. We got to go see it, and we want to talk about it. This is Film Talk. All right, welcome. I am Bryan Schink. I am your host. I am joined today, as always, by my co-host and good friend, Mr. Hunter Farris.
Hi, friends.
All right, and so I went to see Eternals Thursday, 6 p.m., which was the opening show, and there were 5 people in my theater. So when did you go to see it? You said you went to like an early screening?
Yeah, I got to go to a free early screening on Wednesday night, so
Ooh.
the day before you saw it.
So how many people were in
And
the
the
audience
theater
with
was,
you?
it was packed, and it was their biggest theater. It was their IMAX theater.
Wow. That honestly, I wish we could have seen it in a packed theater, because in our theater, I was the one making all the noise during the show. So like I was cheering and I was like, being that obnoxious guy, but like I love Marvel. So I don't care what you think of me when I'm watching movies.
I
But
too am sometimes that obnoxious guy, but that said, like most of there was very little noise made during the movie. Like people didn't even cheer for like the Marvel opening logos. I usually see like as soon as they go bum 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 bum
right,
bum, people
right.
start going woo and start clapping.
Well, to be fair, the
But
opening
there was a
logo.
lot of talk right at the end of the last post credit
Oh my
scene. We'll
gosh!
get into
So
that later.
in my theater it was the same exact thing. There was so much talk at the last post credit scene. But Marvel's been doing something recently where they don't do their iconic opening logo music. They let the music from the upcoming scene like lead the logo in. So there's really
I
not
didn't
too
notice
much to
that.
cheer
Yeah.
about, which I do. I do really like it because it changes it up from how Marvel Studios usually is, and definitely save that for a like an Avengers film almost, because I think that is where
Yeah.
that music really comes in play.
Yeah, on that topic, so I see the Marvel opening titles as the Marvel fanfare as their TV show title sequence.
Right.
And so like I see it as something that sets the tone, gets you in the mood, gets you hyped for the show. Um and it I love whatever any studio changes their opening logo. I loved the opening logos on Loki, on What If, just the
Right.
tiny little changes that they made.
Yeah.
The tiny little changes in Captain Marvel for in remembrance of Stan Lee.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
But I
And
always
this one,
wonder if they're going to change the title, if they're going to change the theme. I'm like, what are they? Why are they changing the music? Oh,
right,
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 because it's not a TV show; it's a movie.
exactly, and it's like anime is like the biggest culprit of that, where you'll like have the most somber episode you'll have ever seen. Like your favorite character could have died, and then the outro music it just goes from like really sad to da na 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 na. And it's just like it was just like a tone shift, but um. So I'm gonna try this cactus fruit thing. I got this at Fye at the mall, which is weird. They had like other types of bottled drinks and stuff. They had one that was like based off of like Mecha Godzilla. Um, so I'm gonna see how this tastes. That just tastes
Are
like
we sponsored?
no, not on the show, not on the show.
Okay, okay.
Uh, that just tastes like not great lemonade. It's just like lemon and water. That's all it is. No, what are the ingredients?
Does it
Triple
taste like lemon water?
flatbread. Oh, it's just water and natural flavors. There's no sugar in it whatsoever. It's carbonated though. It's not terrible. Wouldn't go out of my way to buy it, but it's not terrible. So before
You
we get
did
into
go out of your
this,
way to buy it.
oh no, I didn't go out of my way. I was already at the mall picking stuff up, so I just picked it up while I was there.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So before we get into this, we are going to put a spoiler warning. We're going to be talking spoilers for Eternals. So if you haven't seen it, go see it in theaters or wait till it comes out on Disney Plus. But don't complain in the comments if we spoil it for you. From this point on, it is your fault. So, yeah. All right. So with that, I think we should talk about the first post-credit scene first because that's the one that I have the most to say. I know this is gonna be weird, but but like this is the post credit scene that I was the most hyped to talk about. Uh, Unless you want to start at the
I don't
beginning of the
blame
film
you.
and get there. Um,
I do have a ramble about like the bulk of the film, like
all
the
right,
film proper, rather than the credit scenes.
right.
Do you want me to get into that now, or do you want to save that for later?
Well, let's get into that now then, because I do want to hear this because I have some
Okay.
thoughts as well. So we'll save the first post credit scene. We'll save Harry Styles for you guys. We'll save him. I hate myself
Okay.
now.
Eternals exists in this really weird place between the superhero renaissance and the superhero boom. The superhero renaissance being starting with 2000 with X-Men and ending in 2008, March 2008 specifically, with superhero movie. The superhero boom starting with Iron Man and The Dark Knight in May and July 2008, and going through the present. So the superhero renaissance was defined partly by rigidity, both moral, structural, and narrative rigidity. There was a correct way to make a superhero movie back in the Renaissance, and also there was a correct morality. Good guys were good, bad guys were bad. End of story. No questions needed to be asked. It's not that no questions were allowed to be asked, but no questions needed to be asked because they were the good guys. And no matter what the good guys did, they were still the good guys. And no matter what the bad guys did, they were still the bad guys. This is part of why we're having a lot of hot takes these days about whether Charles Xavier is the good guy or whether Magneto is the bad guy, because the X-Men movies largely came out during the superhero renaissance when the movies were going to clearly portray them as good guys or bad guys,
Right.
and nowadays we have room to make that a hot take. If they hadn't clearly portrayed them as such, it wouldn't be a hot take. It would
Right.
just be a take.
Now,
Anyway,
now I don't think it was 100 like during the Renaissance. I don't think it was 100% white, black and white. Like during those original X-Men movies, you did have that dichotomy between Professor Xavier and Magneto of their friendship being like torn by like Magneto's lust for like basically human genocide almost. I guess we can call it. And they
let's be honest.
Right. And I like from like I've seen the first X-Men film and Days of Future Past, that's it. But from those two films, I did feel the sense of like they tried to make Magneto relatable to a point where it's like we've been oppressed. He lived through the Holocaust. So he has a point, just like Thanos had a point, but those points were poorly not poorly in the like reflected in the writing, but in the mind of the character themselves was poorly translated to action. So like you might agree with their ideas, but not the execution of what they want to have happen.
So Thanos is actually aggress that because Magneto is framed as a bad guy. The camera always looks at him as a bad guy. The script treats him as a bad guy. Thanos in Infinity War, the writers and directors were very intentionally, and the cinematographer were very intentionally trying to make Thanos appear as the hero.
Right.
That's why there's no takes. That's why there's no hot take. Thanos was right. No, the hot take is Thanos was wrong. Because the movie is actively trying to say Thanos was right. That's not a hot take. With Magneto,
Right.
like saying Magneto was right is the hot take because the movie is trying to say he's wrong. And that's kind of the point there that like even if the bad guy is a relatable bad guy, he is still unequivocally a bad guy.
Right.
Or rather unequivocally a villain. Might be a relatable villain, might be an understandable villain, but a villain nonetheless.
Right. And well, with the Thanos thing, they definitely framed him as the hero of the film. However, the score that they put behind it really is what sold me on the dichotomy of his idea and his thought process is acceptable, but his execution, literally in this case, is not. Because you had these like heroic shots, like painting him in like light colors, but then you had a deep, like sinister orchestral background in the background, like music and whatnot, which really like talking to you because like it looks like we're looking at a hero, but I'm getting the feeling that he is not, which I feel like it was perfectly done for Thanos. Like there were not too many villains that I empathize with more than Thanos. Not because I think he was right, because he was so utterly wrong in that scenario. Wiping out half of the population of the universe would not solve what you want to have happen. It would just cause more havoc to be wreaked. But at the same time, I understand, like, you are trying to solve an actual problem, but in the worst way possible. So, I think the entire crew really got that across in such a beautiful way. And I've got to give props to um, Josh Brolin for his portrayal, because, like, not everybody could portray Thanos the way that he did. So,
Oh gosh, yeah, like they did a great job at portraying Thanos exactly the way that they wanted. Back to the Renaissance and the boom. The boom has been largely defined by questioning the Renaissance. The boom has been largely defined by questioning the superhero genre, specifically the Renaissance. Two of the big questions of the superhero boom, like every single movie of the boom has been asking, what defines a superhero movie? What is this genre? And uh, are superheroes actually good people, or do we just believe that because the word hero is in the name?
and that idea really started back with the original Incredibles film, with the with that whole, like, the
Ooh.
cold open of Mr. Incredible saving that one dude who was committing suicide, and then getting sued for it. Which, I have my own hot take. That dude should not have been suing Mr. Incredible for saving his life, because it is in the 60s, and even now, it is illegal to take your own life, or to attempt to take your own life. At least in the state of Ohio, I know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure it's all across the country. If you attempt to kill yourself and you survive, you will either get fined or, like, put in jail or something. It's a stupid law. I don't agree with it, but at the same time, at that point, if the story was going to use that law, Mr. Incredible would not have been liable, because he was doing the necessary actions to save a human life in accordance to the law, whereas that person was breaking the law, henceforth revoking his ability to sue Mr. Incredible for his actions. Now,
I've never thought of that take before.
and I didn't up until just recently when I read the law, because for a while I wanted to, run for governor. At this moment, I don't know if I'm going to, but I was reading up on laws and stuff because I needed to be educated for that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
so that was definitely, like, that idea, that mindset was started in the original Incredibles film, and definitely I can see, especially later movies in the MCU, in the boom, like, diving deeper and deeper into, like, Black Panther, like Infinity War, like Endgame, Ant Man touched on that. I don't think, not Spider Man too much. This new Spider Man definitely is gonna go into that.
Well, not just MCU movies, the entire artistic movement of superhero
Right.
movies throughout the boom, especially like that is the entire premise of The Boys.
Oh, that is, yeah, definitely, definitely.
That's a huge part of the plot for Invincible. That's a huge part of The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises and Batman v Superman and Man of Steel and Suicide Squad and The
Right.
Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey. Like every DC movie has been dealing with that in some degree.
Right.
Like
To
almost
varying
every
degrees of
superhero piece
success.
of media. Yeah, like almost every piece of superhero film or TV that we've gotten in the past 13 years has been asking that question to some degree or another. It's just that things like, say, Miraculous Ladybug answers the question with, yes, heroes are good, villains are bad. If they're not being good, they're not heroes. If they're not being bad, they're not villains.
Right. Now,
But it's still asking the question and still posing the question.
right. Now, I, like, personally, my beliefs in that is there is a gray area that you can enter where you're not a villain or a hero. That's usually where anti-heroes operate. But a lot of times anti-heroes are just heroes with less strict moral codes. But if you want to define a hero as a person who does good no matter the cost, then that's an anti-hero. But then if you want to define, like, a hero as a hero who is bound by a strict moral code of, like, no killing, no putting innocent lives in danger, then that is, like, the purest pure hero that you can find. But in comics, like, that's not interesting. Like, what's interesting is that dichotomy to a degree. Because if all you write is our heroes good, our villains bad, then your body work is going to get stale.
Um, that may be why some people are getting a little bit tired of that may be why some people are asking for a new artistic movement,
Right.
saying, okay, we've had enough of the boom. The boom is one of the longest artistic movements we've had in the superhero genre. The only one longer was the pre-traditional era, before Superman 1978, where it was from 1936 with Flash Gordon to
Right.
1978 with Superman. Like, other than that, the boom is the longest era we've had. Anyway, sorry. Okay, so with that backdrop of film history, my lens for watching Eternals was that this is a movie about deconstruction.
Right.
This is a movie about questioning your identity, your purpose, your belief system, your, I hate to use the phrase, but religion. And the way that they set that up is they start by making it a Renaissance style movie.
Right.
The first act, maybe the first half, is basically acting like it's from the Renaissance. The heroes are good, the villains are bad. It's structured like a Renaissance movie. The villains are even not human, so that we can dehumanize them and treat them in inhumane ways. And then, during Act 2, we start to slowly question things. And around the midpoint, we start to do really big questions around identity and purpose and mission and religion and God and history and memory and everything that millennials have been deconstructing for the past however long.
Right.
And in the process, the movie starts by giving you answers, and then starts to give you questions. But the way that it phrases those questions are by allowing you to ask it the questions, not by asking the questions to you. It's not asking you, are these heroes good? It is allowing you to ask, are these heroes really good?
Right.
Which is something that's like really difficult to do during the boom. Then eventually we start to get some like actual answers to this. But even the answers are still just as muddy as the questions. Like, the answers that we get to, are they fighting the right cause, is, are they? I don't know! The answer that we get to, is the Celestials' plan good, is essentially a trolley problem. There's a reason the trolley problem has never been solved, because the trolley problem is not supposed to have a solution.
Right.
It's supposed to be a philosophical framework for you to figure out what you believe.
Right.
The closest that we get, the question of, are the villains bad? We get, the villains have been hunted down, the villains are acting in self-defense, but that doesn't make them good. They might be anti-heroes, they might just be villains with a good reason to be villains.
Right.
The closest that we actually get to an answer is right when Icarus turns bad.
Oh,
and we
definitely.
go, okay, he is unequivocally bad, we know he's bad, and therefore anything that he does is the movie saying that is bad. So that by the end of the movie we get to this answer of, it's not just about, the movie is saying, don't just question your beliefs. You must question your upbringing. You must question your beliefs, because otherwise you're going to turn out like Icarus.
Right. Although, and I definitely thought of that like a lot very differently. For me at least, the film is bringing up the dichotomy of Eastern versus Western philosophy. With Eastern philosophy being the greater good, the sacrifice of the few to benefit the many, to allow the community to prosper, whereas Western philosophy is the individual is the most important part. Like, take care of yourself first, make sure you on your own are the best you can be, and then you can then affect the later generations on your own. As someone growing up in the Western world and being taught the philosophy of individualism, the whole stopping the Celestial to save Earth was definitely like where like my allegiance lies. But and this is something brought up by Chandler Talks movies on like YouTube. He was saying like the one dude, like the Indian guy, what's his name? Kumal Nanjiani's assistant in the film. He was saying like, oh, he's a human. Why is he not like siding with the heroes in stopping the Celestial? And my thought was like, well, his society has always been raised on community based, the sacrifice of the few to benefit the many. He more than likely believes like, oh, our planet's going to die, I'm going to die, but it's going to help billions later on. And they definitely should have like made that more clear in the film. That's one of my issues. Is they didn't make everything like clear enough to be understood by people who don't like who aren't philosophers. But that's how I always interpreted it, as like Western versus Eastern philosophy. Is the individual more important than the collective, or is the collective more important than the individual? I believe the individual is the most important because individuals make up the collective. Without individuals, the collective doesn't exist.
I don't really know where I fall on that right now. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle right now.
And that's good. It's always good to be in the middle of most arguments, because then you know what both sides stand for. Because like if you're on one side, you don't know why the other side says what it says because you're so far from that side. But if you're in the middle, you know what both sides are talking what both sides mean when they talk about their own philosophies. Not 100% on either side, but more than one or the other.
Um, Another thing that I thought was just like absolutely fascinating about this movie's relationship to the Renaissance and the boom is that okay, the exact second that I saw the first promotional shot of Icarus, I thought he's evil.
Oh yeah, definitely, and that is got everything to do with modern day Hollywood's obsession with the evil Superman trope. Like
Yes.
we had that in Batman v Superman, in Justice League, in The Boys, in Invincible, and now in this. And honestly, like
Megamind.
in Megamind, yes. Honestly, I'm kind of getting tired of it at this point because it's like we are constantly deconstructing the same person and getting the exact same answers out of it. Not because
Oh,
like,
and Brightburn and Superman Red Sun.
oh right, yeah. But it's like not
Like I
because
could probably go on for five
right,
straight minutes just naming movies that have an evil Superman. Now they might
right,
not be literally Clark Kent Kal-El, but they are clearly a stand-in for Superman in some
exactly.
way because they couldn't afford the rights. Anyway, you were saying.
And like on what you were saying, Icarus was literally called Superman in this
Yes!
film, which is like
Yes!
it's like it's awesome that like the DC comics exist in this world, but that is so on the nose. It's not a reference. It's literally just it's another thing that I don't like now looking back at it is that a lot of the film is super vague and you have to like figure it out on your own. But the rest of the film is so in your face blatant that there's nothing to think about. Like there is a middle ground, but the film was like, "Hey, here's the middle ground. Ooh, what's that?" And just they didn't know what they wanted to stick to. Now it could work, but in this case, it's just like, okay, this is just an evil Superman. We know exactly what's gonna happen now, and like I called the twist of Icarus going bad from the moment that I saw the poster because, it's just Superman. And what I didn't call was Icarus literally breaking bad and killing Ajax. And this is funny. I was with my friend watching this, so I leaned over when they reintroduced Druig in the modern day. I leaned over to him and I said, he's going to be the one who killed Ajax. Druig is hiding something. And Druig just, no, that's not who it was at all. They just dropped all of that. It's like, oh, it was Icarus. Okay. I guess I didn't see this coming. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know.
So, this movie finally got me to understand why the evil Superman trope is there.
Okay.
Because in the age of the superhero boom, which is all about questioning morality, Superman cannot be good. Superman is not allowed to be good in superhero film and TV. Probably is allowed in the comics, but in film and TV, if he's good, that doesn't fit in the artistic movement. It's not like the movement has rules, but like
Right.
there was a brief time right at the beginning of the boom when people were still trying to make Renaissance era movies, and critics and audiences absolutely hated them every single time.
Right.
I feel like if a Superman movie or TV show, wait a minute, never mind. I was about to say if a Superman TV show or movie came out where Superman was unequivocally good, audiences would hate it and critics would hate it. And then I realized Clark and Lois exists. Wait,
Superman and
is it
Lois.
Superman and Lois?
Superman
What
and
is
Lois.
the CW?
Literally the best show the CW has ever produced, and this is coming from a Flash fan. Um, Superman and Lois, they do, yeah, they do the Superman is purely good thing perfectly, and like that is why like I have not liked a lot of the boom era superhero movies that are not MCU related, mostly because all they ever want to talk about, most of them at least, is what if Superman but bad. And it's like that's an interesting thing to dissect and to discuss once in a while. But when it's every single film, you start to get like really sick of that idea because it's just like come up with something different. Why don't you do something, question something else? But no, it has to be Superman but bad because Superman is the most popular character. Even though the question has been answered, what if Superman was bad? We'd be doomed.
So I don't think it's because Superman is the most popular character, and this is what I was saying about like I thought this movie finally showed me why evil Superman exists as a trope. It's because Superman is the most good character.
Right,
Like he
right.
is the most morally good, and so if they're going to question moral goodness, the first place and the best place to go is the epitome of moral good. Now, are there other places to go? Absolutely. They've been questioning that with Batman. They've been questioning that through The Boys, with every hero through The Boys. They've been questioning that through WandaVision, through Falcon and the Winter Soldier, etc. But this movie finally made me understand why evil Superman is the trope. That said, evil Superman has become a trope. Evil
Right.
Superman was intended to be a subversion of a trope, but when you subvert the trope the same way over and over and over again, it
Exactly.
stops being a subversion and starts becoming a trope of its own to the point that you
Exactly.
see a character who has laser vision, flight, super strength, and invulnerability, and you're like, he's evil.
Exactly. And that is, I guess, the problem I have
Immediately.
with
That's we
Hollywood.
were recording. I was thinking, wait a minute. The only I mean, it's not really a problem with Hollywood. It's a problem, if you can call it a problem, with art. It's just how tropes evolve. You
Oh,
start to subvert a
right.
thing, it becomes the trope in and of itself. Like, that's how art works. I mean,
Right.
the entire concept of, say, Impressionism was, hey, we want to subvert Impressionism. Wait, other way around. I can't remember which one. It might have been art. But anyway, so, like, the entire concept of, say, Romanticism was we want to subvert the concept of Baroque.
Right.
And they kept subverting the concept of Baroque until eventually it created a whole new artistic movement called Romanticism. That's the entire concept of the superhero boom too. Like we want to subvert the concept of the superhero renaissance until it becomes its own artistic movement.
Right. But the reason that I say it's like an issue, the problem with Hollywood is that when Hollywood finds something that works once, they keep doing it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until it becomes stale, sick, and boring to watch because it's the exact same beats over and over again. And like I can literally like spell it out for you. The evil Superman trope is we have a character says they're all good. We see as the audience the character is not all good. The people around them question if the character is all good. Eventually that character comes out as not all good. The good guys fight the guy that's not all good. That guy either kills one of them or gets killed himself, and then they fly into the freaking sun.
Oh,
That,
and evil Superman must have Superman-like powers and must
exactly.
be nigh on invulnerable, if not
Exactly.
literally invulnerable.
And like literally look at any film with an evil Superman trope in them and use those five bullet points. You will literally find that every single evil Superman hits the exact same bullet points every single time. There is nothing new. Whenever they bring this trope into a film, it's the same. It's never changed. It will never change because they can't think of any other way to change it. Hollywood is stagnant in its beliefs, and that's why I don't want to be involved with main Hollywood themselves, even though I want to get into filmmaking. I want to do independent stuff because I don't want to be bound to a set of rules that everybody in Hollywood follows. Now, there are those directors who are skilled enough to be able to walk around those rules and make their own stuff, Edgar Wright being one of them. But a lot of people, they are shackled to their corporate backers who want safe, traditional films that do the exact same things every single time, which is why we don't see too much like improvement outside of indie films these days. Like most Hollywood is the same or it's copying off of an indie film with like Marvel kind of out of that, like they're here's all of Hollywood. Marvel's like here, like they do their own thing kind of, but at the same time you can still see the same rules applying through all their films.
So that is a completely legitimate lens. That is a completely valid perspective. I do disagree coming from the perspective of a director and studio head,
Right.
but that's a different subject for another day about like the
Definitely.
economics of Hollywood. However, I don't think that the reason why it happens is because of economics by way of like evil Superman or any other trope. I think that's just how art works. You find a trope, you find a cool trope, and you're like, "Ooh, I want to do that," and
Right.
so you do that. I seriously doubt that, for example, Brightburn was James Gunn being like told by anybody you have to make Superman evil, or like Megamind. I seriously doubt that. Oh gosh, I
Titan.
can't remember the director's name off the top of my head.
Oh, not. Never mind.
I seriously doubt that the writers and directors were told you must make Superman evil. Like that's always baked into the pitch. The
Right.
boys, obvious. Superman, Red Sun. Like every time evil Superman comes up, it's the basic bare pitch. So okay, not every time, but that shows to me that like this isn't a studio mandate. That's just how art works.
But even
And
then,
we can say that we don't like that part of art working, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's just how art evolves. And eventually we're going to have people start to subvert the evil Superman trope to something completely different. Like that's kind of just how
right.
art works.
Right. But at the same time, it's like the pitch is like when the show is pitched or whatnot, the writers or directors, a lot of the times it's like what's going to make us the most money, even if it's not the producers and stuff, because it's like what works, what do we know? Okay, do that. And this is coming from someone who's trying to write his own film. I've fallen into that trap before. I have done like I think I've done 4 or 5 like pilot episode pitches that I've gone back through and found it. Okay, I've seen that many times. 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 I've seen that more than many times. I know where that came from. 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 There's not a single new idea in this entire list of ideas. Oh my word. And it's not always because the writer is trying to just do something again, but because it's been done so much by at this point, it's baked into your brain that this works, this is good, let's do this, which then leads to less innovation in Hollywood until you get a director and a writer who is willing to say, let's do something completely different that no one has ever done before. And that is where innovation comes from. At the same time, though, we haven't seen too much innovation in Hollywood outside of those like extremely talented writers and directors like the James Gunn, like Edgar Wright, like even Quentin Tarantino. But that doesn't happen all too often because like most people are stuck in the same, at least from my perspective, are stuck in this same rut of making the same films over and over and over again, which is the same criticism that was thrown at the Force Awakens because it was literally just A New Hope, but with new characters.
So, gosh, I was about to say something about that. Um, so that's what it was. I do think that currently we're in a time period where the concept of genre, formula, trope, and repetition are looked down on. I don't think they should be looked down on, but I recognize that right now we
Right.
are in a time period where it's generally looked down on to have a genre whatsoever, to have any formula, to have any trope. I'm like, no, no, that is not how I feel about it. When
I
when I
get
go
you.
see a movie from a certain genre, I don't want it to subvert the genre. I don't want it to transcend the genre. I just want it to do the genre. If I
Exactly.
go see a heist movie, I don't want some sort of twist on the heist movie. I just want a heist movie. I love heist movies. They're my
Right.
favorite genre. If I go see a Hallmark Christmas movie, I don't want Hallmark to try something new with their formula. I like their formula. Actually,
That
I
makes
shouldn't say
sense.
that because I haven't seen a Hallmark Christmas movie. But like from what I've heard, that sounds adorable. That sounds beautiful and pure and innocent, wholesome fun. And I know that a lot of people love Hallmark Christmas movies. By the way,
Right.
I've worked on like 5 Hallmark Christmas movies. Like
I like how
I
you haven't
haven't been
even
on the
seen
creative
your
team.
own films.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm
Huh.
just so for me. I don't think that genre, formula, trope, repetition, I don't think they're a bad thing, but I fully recognize that other people do, and that we're in an era where that is considered a bad thing simply to have a genre. Sorry, I'm really not representing it well. I'm really making it sound stupid
Oh
when I
no, I
say
get
that.
you. No, I completely
Um,
understand. And definitely like, tropes and stuff will always exist, and I don't hate tropes as like just in general. But what I don't like is the like when the same exact trope, like the same thing is repeated in every single film, every single year, all the time. Like I get like action films have their tropes. They make sense. Romances have tropes, comedies have tropes, but when there's a trope in comedy and you take it and put it in every single comedy, and then you put it in every single action film and every single romance film, and eventually it gets stale. And like there are some films that you just don't need to put a specific trope in, at least I believe. Some films can be criticisms, but not every film has to be a criticism of Superman. You can have pure good Superman exist right now and people would enjoy it alongside of a criticism of pure Superman. But when you do every single character is an evil Superman, that's when I feel like the trope has become stale and it's less of a criticism of of Superman and more of just the normal and more of just hey, he did it, let me do it. And that's honestly how I felt that they did Icarus in this film. They did. I think they did his. They got his fall pretty well, but the concept of the fall in general, I think, was done. Was not should not have been here. I think Icarus should have been a skeptical. I don't think he should have been like the final bad guy of the film, especially because like I did enjoy his character. Um, then, then at the same time though, like I get where they're coming from. But my biggest issue with the film is why make him fly into the sun? Why? I get your I get it was supposed to be like a homage back to the stories of Icarus from the past. It just felt cheesy. It felt way too cheesy for me.
oh, oh gosh, I just got what you meant. I thought he was flying into the sun as a Superman reference. I didn't realize it was an Icarus reference. The other big one that okay, I want to tread very carefully when I say this.
All right.
I mentioned earlier that we are in an era where genre, trope, formula, and repetition are considered inherently bad and make a movie lose points on whatever best movie ever competition there is that Paddington 2 already won. And so we see a movie that repeats anything and has any melody, and we're like, oh, the movie is inherently wrong for doing that. I think you can tell pretty clearly that I disagree with that perspective.
Right.
Predictability is not bad. Our brains are literally wired to reward us for predicting accurately.
Oh,
If
exactly.
you predicted correctly, that does not mean that the movie was bad. That means you predicted correctly. Good
Right.
job. You did the thing.
Right.
On
But there.
top of that, like, go ahead.
All right. But I was gonna say there is a difference between like predicting a twist and the twist being so blatantly obvious that even a monkey with a pencil could figure it out. Like there are some films that they do the twist so poorly that it's either impossible to guess and it should not have been there, which this film does, and I'm gonna get to that, or it's so blatantly obvious that it's not a twist, but they treat it like a twist because they think that they did a good twist, but at the end it's just like, yeah, every single person guessed it. It was not that hard. It was not a twist. It was just this thing that happened.
So,
But go ahead.
the other thing is that, like, familiarity breeds comfort.
Right.
When you buy a chocolate cake from the store, you do not want a subversion on chocolate cake.
Oh,
You
exactly.
do not want a chocolate cake where they remove the chocolate and use vanilla instead. You're like, that's not a chocolate cake anymore. You don't want a
Exactly.
chocolate cake that transcends the concept of chocolate cake. You don't want a chocolate cake
Double chocolate cake.
I'm just like, no. I just want a chocolate cake.
Exactly.
Just give me a chocolate cake. Just make it a completely normal chocolate cake. So, with that
Red velvet all
said,
the way.
there is a scene that I don't know. I don't even know how I predicted it. I literally don't know because I don't think there's any like plot information to build up to it. But I think it's the superhero boom, so the deviants must be good,
Oh, yeah, definitely. I
or at least the
figured
deviants
that out as
must
well.
be empathizable. Because
Right.
I've seen so many people say that if your villain can't be empathized with, they are written wrong. They're written incorrectly,
Oh,
and if there
that's
can't
just
be
wrong.
some yeah, it's still the hot. It's still the common current perception that I see
Right.
generally that if your villain isn't empathizable, they are written incorrectly. And that's especially during the superhero boom, where that is a huge part of the artistic movement and how this era works.
Right.
Or similarly, if you can't have a hot take of the villain was right, then the writer was wrong
Right.
in one sense. So like I see a villain, I'm like they're going to be proven to be at least empathizable, if not full on right.
Right.
And
And
so I just
I
like immediately knew the deviants were going to be maybe not right, but empathizable. The second we saw the deviants, I was like, okay, this is a war. They believe they are correct. There's going to be some scene where we get that twist. Now, I'm not saying that the movie is bad for that. I
right.
will not say the movie is bad. Even if I didn't connect to it, I didn't connect to it. I didn't enjoy the film. I will not say it is bad, especially
Right.
not for being repetitive or predictable, because those just aren't useful criticisms.
Right. And on that same lens, like the deviants, I thought were done. Now, there is another twist. There's a lot of twists in this film. Holy crap! But the deviants, I thought, once Crow evolved into his talking version, I thought that's like his character became bland and boring. I liked the monstrous deviants whose sole purpose was just killing and eating and destroying. I loved their design. I loved how they like stalked around. I did not like once Crow gained conscience after he killed Gilgamesh. That made his character so bland. Um, but at the same time, I understand why they did it. I might not agree with them doing it, but it makes sense as to why. Uh, for the twist, though, like I know enough about the Eternals comic in the comics to know, like when they started the film off by saying the Eternals came from a far off planet called Olympia, and that the Deviants came from out of known space, that they were changing up the origin story. I didn't think that that was going to be a lie until the twist came where it's like, oh no, we created you. And it's like, oh, so you are using the comic book origin of these characters. Okay, when can we get mutants, please? Because in the comics, the Celestials actually came to Earth in prehistoric days, and they were experimenting on humans, and they created three subsets of humans. Like you had humans, then you had the Eternals, who were immortal beings with immense powers. You had the Deviants, who had an innate gene that made them monstrous and bloodthirsty, and then you had the mutants, who had in gene latent abilities that would manifest later in life that would give them superpowers. So that's where the mutants came from in the comics, was from the Celestials. And so now that we have the Celestials and we know that they created both of the Eternals and the Deviants, there's a chance that we could also be getting mutants, whether it be from tampering in the past by the Celestials or from, I don't know, a future encounter with the Celestials and some like celestial power or whatnot radiating from the Celestial buried within Earth. I think that's how we're going to end up getting mutants in the MCU, and I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to getting mutants in the MCU. That is definitely a conversation for a different day
Oh,
because I got
exactly.
my thoughts about it, but that's going to
Oh,
lead to a
same.
whole different conversation.
Um,
Um,
but while we're talking about twists and stuff, I want to bring up the
yeah,
twist with Sprite because I was not a fan of the whole, oh, she loves Icarus, but she can never be with Icarus because she was stuck as an 11-year-old. Like, where was that set up? There was no setup for that in the film whatsoever. It was just something that Kumail Nanjiani's character, it was just like, oh yeah, she loves Icarus. It's like, okay, when was that established? When did that come up? We've only ever seen her as this little trickster like Loki who's making illusions and like doing plays and stuff. There was never any scene where like Icarus was walking away, and the camera lingered on Sprite for a second, as you could see like something like within her eye, like something within her soul, that showed that she had feelings for Icarus. But at the same time, she only ever acted like a kid in the movie, so that it makes sense that there was no forewarning. But at the same time, there should have been. At least I think there should have been. I want to hear what you have to say on that.
I think there was a little bit. The first time that she sees Icarus during the main plot line, she runs up to him, gives him a hug, shouts his name, is so excited to see him, has missed him so much. At the same time, I thought it was just because, oh yeah, they're family.
Right.
She hasn't seen her brother in like 500 years. I get why she would be excited. Now, that said, after we get the reveal of, oh yeah, she loves him, I look back and I'm like, oh! New meaning to that scene. I love when twists give new meaning to previous scenes.
Right.
And I don't, I don't think that a good twist needs to be guessable. Except in one very specific genre, like within post-Christie murder mysteries, twists need to be guessable.
Oh, definitely.
Pre-Christie murder mysteries, they don't have to be. That wasn't the point.
Right.
But like outside of post-Christie murder mysteries, I don't want the twist to be guessable. I want the twist to add new meaning to the previous sequences. I don't care if I can guess it. I care if I go back and rewatch it and I'm like, yep, that tells me more. That gives me new information and maybe even an entire new plot line, an entire new character arc. But the big thing with like Sprite and Icarus is, okay, there are a lot of things plot-wise that we could critique about the film, that we could criticize about the film, that we could even nitpick about the film. I don't think plot is the point of this film.
Oh, I don't think so either. Like, I love this film, not because of the plot, but because of the characters and the settings and the scale. Like this film should have been purely character and purely spectacle, but I believe they tried putting a plot where it didn't really belong. Like there didn't need to be a complicated plot. It could have been a very simple plot, extremely simple with few twists, and just focus on the characters and the spectacle, and I think this movie would have benefited from it. At the same time, though, I loved this movie. Like, I love this more than the average person likes this movie. Even my friend liked this movie, but at the same time, he's just a regular dude who watches movies for the big action scenes. But no, this film was not a plot-driven, should not have been a solely plot-driven film. But the plot's passable. It's not Thor the Dark World terrible.
So my lens is that everything in this film exists to serve the theme. That is just a perspective and a lens. That doesn't make it correct. But it makes the film a lot more enjoyable for me because I didn't connect to the film. I didn't connect to any of the characters. That's not a criticism. Just because I say my experience with a film does not make it a criticism of the film. I am simply saying that I didn't connect with the characters. I might have been tired.
Right.
I didn't get enough sleep the previous night. I might have been sitting in the wrong spot of the theater. I might have been distracted. There are so many things that could have been me instead of the film. Or maybe it just wasn't made for me. Maybe it wasn't the right fit. It's okay for an audience member to not connect with the film. That doesn't make it a criticism. Okay, so, sorry. There's my rant. With that said, so yes, I didn't connect the characters. So I found the characters much more... I found it much more... I liked it a lot more to think of the characters as simply a way to serve the theme of deconstruction. Right. Sprite being another take on the theme of deconstruction of what if you start to deconstruct and then you find a safe harbor of somebody you like who didn't deconstruct all the way. Do you go back to them?
Right.
Do you leave? Do you leave them? Do you break off your friendship with them? And like Sprite and Cersei had that legitimate question come up. I see the entire film as mostly an allegory for deconstruction, with every character acting as a different form of deconstruction. Because like I didn't connect to any of the characters, like none of them. So like I'm like, what is Gilgamesh doing in this movie? And I'm like, no, that's not the point.
Right.
What is Gilgamesh doing in this theme? How is he serving the allegory?
Gilgamesh was awesome.
He was.
I really like these characters. They're not the most three-dimensional characters, but I feel like they are fleshed out enough, at least most of them, to serve the purpose that they were meant to serve in the film. Now, at the same time, I think Icarus is the least interesting of the characters, just because like I don't really enjoy the evil Superman trope, and he just was not very interesting outside of his whole like final thing like between him and Cersei and that fight. But other than that, like I just didn't. Icarus was probably my least favorite character. Uh, Kumail Nanjiani's character is up there just because he is Kingo. Thank you. Because he is like the comic relief. I love the comic relief. I loved all of his scenes. Um, I loved the trope of his butler always had another camera when they broke his camera. At the end of the film, when or not the end of the film, at the end of that like midpoint fight scene in the woods, when Kingo slays that deviant, and he's like, "Please tell me you got that," and his butler's like, "I did, sir," and he's just like, "Yes." He
On the
was
topic of the
pretty good.
characters, I do think that Icarus did a great job serving the theme of deconstruction.
Right, right,
Like,
and you can do
Icarus was just as important to the theme of deconstruction as Cersei was, because they had
right,
to give both sides of deconstruction and see, okay, what happens if you don't deconstruct and what happens if you do. That way they could really explore that theme.
right.
And on the topic of characters that we loved, Sprite is a great example of why I love illusionists.
Oh
Like, my
yes,
favorite D&D character ever to play has been a shape-shifting illusionist. And I just
nice.
love playing the character. I'm
Right,
like, I don't need to fight. I don't need to do damage. I just need to create some illusions and be cool. And like Sprite really shows just how cool
right.
illusion powers are. Like if multiple man is off the table, when people ask what superpower do you want, my first answer is always multiple man from X-Men. My second answer is always illusions.
Right. And like Sprite is, in my opinion, Loki done better. Like if the actual Loki from the comics was done in the MCU, that is what Sprite is. Because the Loki that we see is not the Loki that like see in the comics. Because comic Loki is much more. His whole thing hinges much more on his illusions, his magic. Whereas in the films, it's a lot more on just being a trickster and like sword fighting. And he does way too many sword fights in the MCU. Loki doesn't fight with swords. He fights with magic. And that is why I loved in the Loki show the classic Loki played by what's his name? It's Grant
Richard E.
something.
Grant.
Thank you. That him. He did a beautiful job bringing classic Loki to life, especially in his fight with Eliath. But we're getting off topic. Um, I loved Sprite's character. She brought the right amount of sarcasm and like just teen angst to the table. And her little like that little scene between her and Brian Tyree Henry's Fastos, where she makes some snarky comment and he's like, you know what's not safe for the universe? Your attitude or your sarcasm. That was one of my favorite scenes. And Fastos is probably my favorite character in general because all of his humor is subtle, but it's hilarious. Like he is not the jokester type. All of his jokes come from line delivery and just him being there.
So on the topic of Fastos, there is a superhero movie that I really want to see exist someday.
Okay.
And I don't think that it can be made. I want it to exist.
Right.
So, okay, context here. I'm a chosen one. I was raised from birth to save the world. I was taught during my entire life that when the world goes to tar, that I'm going to be the one to have to save it.
Wait, are we talking you yourself or a plot
Me.
of a movie? Okay.
Like, this is my life. After about 25 years, I was like, I'm done. If the world wants to be saved, it can go save itself. But this is not working for me anymore.
Okay.
I said, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to engage in some self-care. I'm going to engage in some therapy. I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I'm going to find joy in life. And I'm not going to save the world. Because that is not my job right now. Because
That's a good
saving
way
the
of
world
looking
is
at it.
not going to make me happy. And the only thing that I can do is try to find some happiness in this life.
Right. And
And
now,
every time I see a superhero movie, that character is the villain. And I'm like, but, I don't want to change. It's not working. It is an intense amount of pressure. It is a ridiculous amount of pressure, an unhealthy amount of pressure
right.
that just like destroyed me on multiple occasions. I can't do it anymore. I can't be the chosen one,
Right.
whether I want to be or not. And so I figure, look, if I can't do it, if my brain is going to break by trying to be the chosen one, I'm going to try to be happy. I'm gonna try to make people's lives better, and I'm gonna try to be wholesome, and I'm gonna be try to be kind, but I'm not going to be a superhero. I don't
And that
care
makes
what powers I
sense.
get. I don't care what. Sorry, I'm going on a ramble, but like at the same time, like
It's all good.
superhero movies, I'm not trying to be the villain. I'm not trying to destroy the world. I'm not trying to give up my responsibility. I'm realizing my responsibility isn't working. It's an unhealthy amount of pressure, and I just want to find some joy in life. And I
Right.
really want a superhero movie that shows that. The closest that I've ever got was Fastos. But every time that we get that, the character arc is always going from trying to be happy to going back to being miserable to save the world.
Right.
And I'm like, no. The character arc that I want to see, I'm not saying that it should be there, but the
Right.
character arc I want to see is going from breaking your brain to try to save the world to trying to be happy.
Right. And here's the way that I see it. Because I'm a Christian, um, I've always looked at it as we are all destined for something. Some of us will bring a lot of peace to our world. Um, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we ourselves are safe and we are good and we are healthy. So that way, when the time comes and it is finally your time to step up to the plate, you are ready. Not because you've trained, not because you've thought of it, but because you've taken care of yourself and you have worked on your relationship with God. Not everybody believes the way that I do, and that's fine by me. I believe how I believe. You can believe how you believe, and I'm not going to try and change you. But the way that I've always thought of things is like, first off, never tell your kid they're the chosen one. Even if you know for a fact that they're the chosen one, never put that pressure on your child. Because when the time comes, they will know. When the time comes for you to step up to the plate, to make the sacrifice play, you do not want to be anticipating that for your entire life because that will drive you to madness. Because
It
the
did run me to madness.
right, because the
That's not a
bravest.
hypothetical. That is what
Oh no,
actually
no, I
happened
I
to
know,
me. That
I
is
get
my
that.
history. I'm just like testifying to what you're saying. They're
Oh,
like,
okay,
this
right,
isn't just a philosophy.
right,
That's my lived experience.
right. Because like if you tell somebody they are going to be great, they're going to spend their entire life believing that, and that could either manifest in I have to be the best possible, so I have to push myself past my limits and break my body, or on the flip side is I'm the best person there is. You have to bow down and serve me. And that is where the trope of you're the chosen one, awesome, I'm the best, you are my slaves now comes from. Because you've got both of those sides. You've got the side of I've been told the chosen one. My whole life has become ruin, and then you've got evil German guy.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like if the movie that I just pitched, if the superhero movie that I was just suggesting existed, people would think that it's a character arc from hero to villain. I'm like, no. It is a character arc from Western philosophy of toxic productivity and a toxic individualism to an Eastern philosophy of finding peace,
Right.
finding inner peace, and finding joy in the moment and serving your fellow man in the ways you actually can instead of going out there and having a big fight scene.
Right.
That is not a criticism of fight scenes. I'm just saying that's not the only way to serve your fellow man.
Oh, trust me,
And
I can criticize fight
I
scenes all day.
and I guess maybe what I should be learning from these superhero movies where they take a break and then come back to it, is that like it's okay if I want to go back to being the chosen one whenever that happens to be. When the world calls on me to go do your destiny, then I guess I can go back. And in
Right.
that moment, if I say no, maybe I am a villain. But in all
Right.
seriousness, not every character exists to validate my mistakes.
Exactly.
There are some characters who they're the bad guy because I need to learn to not be like them.
Right.
So maybe the fact that Fastos, getting back to Eternals, maybe the fact that Fastos found happiness. He found a family, he found a life, he found what he loved to do with his time, and then went back to being a superhero. Maybe that's not there just to reinforce the rugged Western individualism and toxic productivity. Maybe that's to say you can come back if you want to,
Right.
when the time comes.
Definitely. The way that I saw it, especially with Fastos, is like he's like the smartest person on the team, and with your testimony, he found his what he liked. He found his life, but eventually duty called, and because he was needed, he was willing and he was ready to take up the his calling and go back out there and do his duty, even if it meant he would not get to go back to his family. And that's how I've always believed. It's like you will find happiness, but eventually the calls of duty will come for you, and at that moment it's your time to embrace what you were born to do. Not because like you have to and because like you're forced to, but because it is your destiny. You can say no. They gave him the option to say no in the film, kind of like ring around sort of option. But he was going to be allowed to say no, but it was his husband who said that he should go. And it's the validation of the people around you that say it's time for you to fill your destiny. We will be fine. Look at Iron Man in that same scenario.
On that
Um,
topic, I love that Fastos didn't go fulfill his destiny out of duty or moral obligation or pressure. He went and fulfilled his duty. Not fulfilled his duty, fulfilled his destiny out of love.
exactly.
He
Because
just wanted to
of
protect and serve the people he loved. And
right.
I was constantly pushed of like pressure, duty, moral obligation. That's why you fulfill your destiny, regardless of whether it actually helps anybody else, and regardless
Exactly.
of whether you actually give a darn about the people you're helping.
Right.
Sorry, my upbringing was very unhealthy when it came to being a chosen one, but
Definitely.
that's what my lived experience was.
Right. On this topic, well, on this, it's like a tangential topic. Talking about Fastos. If we don't bring this up, we will get flamed for it in the comments. So I think we have to. Um, like representation in movies has not been great as of recently. And as a Christian, I will get flamed no matter what I say because of my personal belief system. So I'm just gonna say what I believe. I thought the representation in this film was awesome. I thought it was perfect. There was no in your face, oh hey look, he's gay, he's gay. Hey you, guess what? He's gay. It was, I have a family now. This is my husband. That's it. There was no in your face pushing it. It was portrayed as a regular family because as much as some people don't agree with that setup of a family, as much as like a lot of people think like marriage is between a man and a woman, okay, I get that. I'm one of those people who believes that, but I also believe in personal choice, and I believe that we should represent the people that live on this planet. Not because I believe that it's good, but because that's how people are. And they need to see someone in their fiction who looks and who acts like them. And I thought it was done perfectly. I didn't feel like it was too pushy shovey. It was there and it was portrayed just like the relationship between Icarus and Cersei, between Cersei and Dane, between
Akari and Druig.
but right, Makari and Druig, between Gilgamesh and Athena, it was done well. And I can't say that about too many modern films. A lot of films, when they try to tackle or when they try to include homosexual relationships outside of like Deadpool 2, it's always in your face, stereotypical, look, this is representation, ha ha. and it's just it doesn't make for good representation. It makes for pandering, at least I think. Um, but I want to know what you think about it, because no matter what, I'm gonna have spears thrown at me.
Okay. First things first. I'm a cishet white man.
Right.
My opinions about represent. Oh, sorry. I'm a cishet white man raised in a conservative Christian environment. Any
Same.
opinion I have about representation is going to be colored by that.
Definite. Well, even then, like we can. There's still we can we. Ugh. We can still have opinions about things that we don't understand or that we aren't personally involved in. But on that topic, I don't think just saying like, oh, said person's opinion is wrong because they don't agree with it is they're wrong. I think that's wrong, but at the same time, you are right. Our opinions are going to be colored by who we are and how we grew up because that's how opinions work. Like people don't get it.
Yeah, that
Opinions are shaped by the way that you were raised and the people you were around.
that's why I very intentionally didn't say so I don't have an opinion or I'm not qualified to give an opinion. Just any opinion that I have is going to be influenced by that. If you want me to give my opinion, I will say there was a lot of representation of this. Okay, okay,
Right.
okay. There are six character. There are six main characters of color. There are more main characters of color than main white characters. In fact, if I remember correctly, there are more main character like protagonists of color than named characters of any other kind. There are six protagonists of color,
Right.
well, main characters of color, and there are four characters who are not characters of color if we're counting Crow and Arishem.
I don't think. I think I
No,
don't.
five.
I don't think we should add the Celestials and the Crow into that because they're still technically people of color because they're completely different races. Like one of them is a race of god beings and the other is a race of monsters who grew a conscience. So they definitely fall into
Fair.
the protagonist or character of color category. But not just that.
Yeah.
Like half of the main group was female. And not only that,
Hmm?
up until now, neither of us referenced race or color because the characters that never came up. And that's one thing that I enjoy is like I get that like some movies, the whole point of the movie is to bring up black culture and to like talk about what happened in the past. That's perfect. I completely get that. I have no problems with it. The problem comes when every single film that has to be an issue that's brought up. But in this film, it's not. Like, Fastos being homosexual was never brought up. It's never mentioned. It's not a plot point because it doesn't matter. Because, it's a relationship. Fastos being black was never brought up because that's not an issue amongst their team. Like, they don't communicate with anyone outside of their team, and they've all already accepted everybody because they were born together. And so, like, some movies
So,
don't need to have that issue of, like, they don't need to have the same issues every single time. And I like that because we didn't even have to bring up race because it doesn't come into play. They're just really good characters.
oh, and also we got a deaf character.
Oh, deaf. Oh, yes, that's right. And the actress is deaf in real life, which is very good representation. I don't think that's how it has to be every time, but the fact that that's how it happened and she was so good in the role is a testament to don't just look for actors who can talk.
So not only have a lot of representation, it also has a lot of intersectionality. Like, sure, we could say there's a lot of female characters, there's a lot of characters of color, there's a disabled character, and there's a homosexual character. And
Right.
I would not be at all surprised to find that Sprite is non-binary.
Oh, she's definitely Gen Z. She's definitely She's non-binary, and her pronouns are spur and right.
I would not be at all surprised to find that Sprite uses they them pronouns and is non-binary. Actually, I can't remember if they ever use any pronouns for Sprite during the entire film. I can't remember.
I think that
Anyway, um,
I think Kingo used she when he was referring to like
Okay,
her
I can see
liking
that.
Icarus. I think he might have just said Sprite.
Specifically when it comes to non-binary, I would guess gender fluid. Now that's partly because I just have a bias that all shapeshifters are gender fluid.
Oh, I mean,
She's technically a shapeshifter,
right,
but at the same time, maybe not. Maybe not.
right,
Anyway, so we could say, okay, yeah, they have a lot of it, but let's get more specific about the intersectionality. We have a homosexual character of color. We have multiple women of color. We have a deaf woman of color. Like, they went really hard into the diversity
right,
and into the representation. Now, do you think that's a good thing or not? That's your choice. I'm just acknowledging the fact that it is there.
right.
I think it's really cool because I have never got to look up to a character and go, they look like me. They're heroes. That's awesome.
Right. And yeah, that
Because
definitely
I'm a
makes
cis white
sense.
guy, and all of them look like me.
Right.
So I'm so glad that say deaf women of color can look at Makari and be like, she looks like me. She's a hero. That's awesome.
That's definitely very good. I like when people have like characters that they can look up to. But like the issue that I always have when it comes to representation is representation for representation's sake, not because it fits with the story, but because we need to have a female in here. I don't know. Let's cast just this female over here. Whereas instead they could have cast like a guy who was good for the role. I've always believed in casting based on talent, not based on skin color or sex, unless the role requires it. Like for example, Heimdall in the comics, he's a white guy. I love Idris Elba. He was the perfect fit for that role.
Doesn't.
Representation comes second fiddle to that because like Heimdall is just that good. But someone like Steve Rogers, make him black, that doesn't work. Like his backstory doesn't work if Steve Rogers was a black guy, just based on the time period in which his backstory is set. That would be representation for representation's sake. Sam Wilson, though, took up the mantle of Captain America. That is how you do representation. And it was done in the comics, so props to that.
So again, I grew up in a conservative Christian environment. I've kind of left the conservative side of that behind.
Right.
But something that, okay, I know that you are a conservative Christian, something that might give you a different perspective that might be more enjoyable when it comes to representation is thinking of representation like it's fan service.
Right.
Now, I don't say that derogatorily. Please understand, my username is literally Wholesome Film Talk. I don't say anything derogatorily. I love fan service. Who doesn't like fan service?
I mean,
okay, I know some people are like, oh, that's just fan service. And I'm like, fan service is awesome. I love fan service.
Endgame is literally just fan service the movie, but it works because it's fan service done well. Because it fits the story, and it doesn't detract from like the narrative being told.
And honestly, if there were a movie that were literally just fan service,
that's Ready Player One.
I would enjoy that.
That is Ready Player One.
I still need to see Ready Player One.
You know what? We're doing that next week. That's what we're doing next week.
During say Into the Spider-Verse, a lot of what I loved about Into the Spider-Verse was fan service. I've been a Spider-Man fan for like a very long time, and so like I saw like the Ricochet costume, and I was like, they put the Ricochet costume in a movie. They did the thing. Or like the end credits scene with not only 2099, one of my favorite characters ever, and I'm like, they put one of my favorite characters in a movie. How? Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Or when they go to Earth 67, I want to say, and do the pointing meme. I'm like, they did the thing! I honestly love when I get to say they did the thing about a movie. This is also why Muppet Haunted Mansion is my favorite movie of the year, because the whole thing is nothing but fan service, and I loved it! So, yeah, I mean, like, maybe it'd be helpful to think of representation like fan service. I mean, like, Makari, you could say, is, say, fan service for deaf people, or for women of color, or whatever else. And, like, that's a good thing. Fan service is awesome. What's wrong with that?
I don't know. So I'm more of like a center.
Yes, that's also. Sorry, I should add that is a very reductive way to describe both fan service and representation.
Right.
Representation is not all about fan service. I'm just saying for the conservative Christian who's like, oh, representation is awful, there shouldn't be representation, and I'm not saying that's you or
Oh
the
no, that's not
conservative
me at
Christian
all.
who's like, representation is neutral, can be done well, can be done poorly. I'm like, hey, here's another perspective that may be helpful.
Right. Uh, with that though, I would always think of like that as being the wrong way to do uh, a representation. But that's just my opinion, because representation shouldn't be done just because you have to fill a mandate. Like, oh, we want to make all like the deaf people happy, so let's just cast this deaf actress. I think that it should be done either because she is the best fit for the role, or because the character is like very like would work with a deaf actress, like in the case of Eternals. I would. This is just me though, as like a center right leaning uh, conservative Christian, but I'm more moderate these days. Um, just representing somebody just to represent them, I think, is more pandering than anything. But once again, I don't not a part of that community. But as like someone who wants to be a film like a director and a producer and whatnot, when I'm casting, I want to try doing blind casting. No physical acting to begin with. Just show me you reading the lines as best as you can, and I will pick from that group. Then you would come into a physical casting where you show me like how you can act. And from there, from that point on, would be who is the best actor for this character, who portrays the character better. And as long as the character itself does not need to be of a specific race, then we would go off of okay, um, you're a really, really good actor. You are black. You're hired because it doesn't matter. At least to me, unless the character itself depends on the actor being white or being black or being Asian, I don't think that you need to put too much emphasis on who you cast outside of are they talented, do they fit the character, and do they make it work. But once again, that's just my own perspective. Everyone's going to have a perspective on it. And that's why we have these discussions. So we can learn from different communities, from different people on how they think that it should be done.
On that topic, coming from the perspective of a studio head, I can't imagine a studio head requiring representation, especially when we're talking about crusty old white men who grew up in the 50s. I seriously doubt that Bob Iger is requiring representation. I seriously doubt that Jeffrey Katzenberg is requiring representation. I don't think it's a studio mandate. In fact, I personally don't think that studio mandates are a thing. That's a topic for another day. Sorry, I'm just like,
No, I get
no,
you.
no, no, no. Just because a
Um,
thing is there in a movie, just because it's done poorly, doesn't mean that it's the studio's fault.
oh no, it definitely
Most of the
doesn't
time,
mean
it
that.
actually is the director
No, I
and the writer
definitely
and the DP and the editor. Like, the studio is just a
right.
collaborator in a group of dozens of collaborators, and it would be really just wrong to say that it's their fault when anything goes wrong.
Right. Oh no, I'm not saying it's always the studio head's fault. But why I bring this up is because of the political landscape right now. And I don't want to get too deep into politics because that's how you stir up like controversy and stuff. However, because of like because of like the current political landscape, I wouldn't put it past studio heads to want to appease what a lot of people are calling the leftist mob, because they're calling for representation. They burned down cities 2 years ago. So I guarantee you some of these studio heads are worried to a degree about this leftist mob. I'm using air quotes for everyone who's listening. That they're going to come to their
I
studio
appreciate the air
next
quotes.
and burn it down. This is coming from somebody who spent 2 years listening to nothing but the news, nothing but like politics and stuff. I've gotten away from that because it
I'm
really.
sorry.
Oh, don't
That
be.
sounds that just sounds psychologically horrible.
I've gotten away from it though, but like for a while, it's
Good
just like
choice.
it's good to stay up to date on what's happening. I was very interested in politics for a long time with the news because of the riots, of the fires and stuff like that, which is why I got into all of that in the first place. Nowadays, I just want to focus on movies. I want to focus on my friends, on my work. I don't care, but at the same time, there's still that fear in my like a fear that I have that if I were to say the wrong thing, I could get canceled off of the internet, or if there's something that I said 5, 10 years ago, people could like make me lose my job for it because like with what happened to James Gunn or Hartley Sawyer from tweets from like 11 years ago that they'd since apologized for. Once again, not wanting to get into politics on this, so that's just my thoughts on the whole studio head thing. So let's shift from that, and if there's any more, like we can always talk about it off air if you want to talk about this stuff at some
I'm
point.
trying to remember if there was anything more about like the film proper, like before the credits, that I wanted to bring up.
Oh, scale.
Oh, okay. Before we get into scale,
Okay.
those costumes were dope.
Yes.
Every single costume in the movie
They
was
were
so cool,
good.
and I can't wait for Los Angeles Comic Con to see people cosplaying as Eternals because they look so cool. Or like, can you imagine seeing people cosplaying as Celestials?
Oh.
Every character, or like even the Deviants, the character design looked awesome.
Oh, it did. It looked so. The Deviants, I think, had the best character design. I think what I'm most excited to see out of Comic Con is the Wish.com versions of the Eternals. Because like
Oh, no.
I love seeing the low budget costumes for different characters because that's all I've been able to do because I'm broke.
I don't have money.
It's the same, but it's like I love seeing what people can do with not much money. But I also like seeing just the terrible versions of them, not because it was low budget, because they didn't care or they just threw it together last minute. I think they are interesting and funny at the same time. But I am so looking forward to seeing the actual the good quality costumes as well, because those are going to be fantastic. On that though,
I also spent a lot of.
Go ahead.
Oh, I also spent a lot of time on cosplay TikTok.
Oh, dude,
where like every day is Comic Con.
Exactly.
I just get to see cool costumes every day, and I'm like, I can't wait to see Eternal costumes. These things look so cool. Okay, you were saying.
I'll be right back.
On the topic of being done in an hour-ish, I actually need to head out in a little bit.
Oh no, I'm just talking
like
in general.
15-ish minutes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just want to let you know, gonna be picking up my date from her work, and like we're arrange our schedules. I was going to be picking her up from her place, so she was going to drive home first. Instead, I'm picking her up from her work, and so I'm picking her up like half an hour earlier. I think you get the point.
I get the point.
Like,
all right,
great. Thank you.
We should probably wrap it up pretty quickly.
Great. So, what do you want to discuss? Right, you wanted to discuss the 2 post-credit scenes.
Oh yes,
and also you wanted to discuss scale.
Scale, okay.
Also wanted to discuss scale.
So just like we talked about in our Dune review, scale is something that is very hard to do in modern cinema, as shown by like Godzilla and the Legendary franchise. This movie, it did for me scale perfectly with the Celestials. Like in every shot we see them framed with a human or framed with the Earth in some way, except for that one scene where they're explaining like how they created the universe. But by that point, we knew how big they were in comparison to everything else. They looked beautiful. And that is my biggest praise for this film, is the film was beautiful. The colors were vibrant. The set pieces were massive. The characters were bigger than life. The costumes were amazing. The Celestials looked beautiful, and the scale of Tiamat, the dormant Celestial busting out of Earth, looked beautiful. It looked like something that you would see like a giant person being busting out of the planet. And that scene where Erishim appeared in the atmosphere of the planet generally scared me. What do you think, though?
I do think that it did scale well. I also think that Dune did scale better.
Oh, I agree.
That isn't an insult to this film.
Right.
That compliment to Dune.
Right.
Also, I shouldn't have brought that up. Those 2 films don't need to be compared.
Well, I think it's fine. At least personally, I think it's fine to bring up Dune in comparison because both of them, while they're different films, they both had one thing in common, which was scale and making big things big. And I think like that is a good comparison because they were both recent movies that both had massive things that needed to be shown to us exactly how big they are. And I agree, Dune definitely did that better. The scene that I can think of is that like teleportation tube, and how the first time we see it, one ship is coming out, but we don't really know how tall that one ship is, and then we learn how big the ship is. And then the next time we see the teleportation tube, we see that you could stack 80 of those ships on top of one of each other. And you realize, holy crap, that tube is ginormous. But I still think Eternals did very well, especially in comparison to like
I think that it
Godzilla.
did at least good on the
Right.
scale. Like I could tell big. Like I couldn't feel how big, but I could feel that he was big.
Right, right. And that I think that is a testament to the film, especially because like so Kevin Feige has said that like the MCU going forward is going to be split into two sections. The Earthbound section, which at this moment is going to be the multiverse side of the MCU, and the cosmic side. So, Earth side, you got your Peter Parkers, your Doctor Stranges, your Black Widows, stuff like that. And then your cosmic side, you have Eternals, Guardians of the Galaxy, hopefully Nova one of these days. That would be amazing. Your Fantastic Four, even. And so, I think like because if they were all together right now, you would have big multiversal fight, giant celestials, and at the same point, I don't think having two of the same level threats would really work well unless you had two sides of the universe. One that deals with cosmic threats, one that deals with earthbound threats, which is how it is in the comics usually.
I'm I think yes, I recognize Kevin Feige said that. I also think that there is another section to it, which
Okay.
is the street level heroes.
Ooh, I like that. I like that thought.
It's weird to think that Falcon and Winter Soldier is a street level hero, but like they're dealing with the kind of threat that like Spider-Man or Daredevil would usually be dealing with.
Right.
It's just a much more politicized version. And I still think that that is a part of Marvel.
Right.
It's just that we kind of all forgot that Falcon and Winter Soldier existed.
For probably for better to be honest because while the show is good, it's not great, at least in my opinion. I let the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a whole other can of worms, and my problems with that show have nothing to do with the politics, which is surprising for a lot of people. But it has everything to do with the execution of the ending and of John Walker's character and of Sharon Carter. Anyway,
We'll talk about that in another episode, maybe. Maybe
exactly.
not. We'll find out. We did want to talk about the scenes, though.
The end, the post credit, the end. Okay, so mid credit scene. Um, so when Pip the Troll like jumped out of that portal in the mid credit scene, I I knew exactly who Pip was, but I wasn't sure who he was escorting because in the comics, he's been the escort of both Adam Warlock and Star Fox, and so I thought, wait, why would we be introduced to Adam Warlock here and not in Guardians 3? Then we saw the cape, and I
I
knew
mean, we
instantly.
have already introduced Adam Warlock.
Well, we haven't seen his character yet, and like I
Okay,
didn't
that's fair.
know because he's gonna be a big thing in Guardians 3, so you'd expect to see him in Guardians 3. But as soon as I saw the cape, and as soon as I got that first glimpse of the suit, I knew right then that it was Star Fox, and I went bananas in the theater because Star Fox is an incredibly like complex and important hero in Marvel Comics, but not many people know who he is, and so I'm afraid that my going bananas over seeing Star Fox to all of the girls in the theater translated to, "Hey, why is that weird cowboy getting so excited over Harry Styles?" And it's like,
Because he's
I'm not.
Harry Styles.
I'm he.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I know you're not like. like that.
Harry
I can
Styles
fully acknowledge
is.
that the guy literally playing Eros, the god of sexual love,
Oh,
is
right.
hot.
Exactly. But it's just like, oh no. Once I figured out who was playing, it was like, oh, I look like one of those guys. Oh, and what's worse is I was with my best friend, and he's a dude. So there's that. Me, who already has the mannerisms of a gay person or a bi person at least, going bananas over Harry Styles. I'm just like, oh nope. But Star Fox is like a major character in the comics, and I'm actually really excited to see him in the MCU. Um, but um, but that's not the most important of the post credit of the credit scenes. And so, would you like to
I
take the
will say I'm
reins?
super excited to.
Would you like to
I
take
will
the
say I'm
reins?
super excited to see Eros slash Star Fox slash
Right.
whatever he is. I don't know what he is. I just think it's super cool.
Oh, it is
Like I need
very
to know
cool.
what it is to think that it's cool, and I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to it. As for the second post credit scene, I don't know much about Black Knight. I
Okay.
hope that he interacts with Moon Knight. I know that in the comics in some degree, but at the same time, these aren't the comics.
Right.
I think it's going to be fascinating to see like what does Marvel actually do with a Black Knight in the MCU, which is trying to be a relatively realistic take on relatively realistic. Like
Right.
it's not trying to feel like a comic book all the time, and Black Knight is kind of a comic booky concept and
Yeah.
kind of a over the top goofy concept that's taken very very seriously. I assume I don't know much about Black Knight. I am really excited though. Okay, so on the last line of the post credit scene, you sure you're ready to do that, Mr. Whitman, or something like
Right.
that? My entire theater was looking at each other like, is that Samuel L. Jackson or is that Mahershala Ali? And
I thought
Chloe
different.
Zhao confirmed that it is. Chloe Zhao has confirmed that it is Mahershala Ali. That's Blade.
Right.
I'm like,
I
okay,
thought.
this is awesome. Like, we haven't gotten into the occult side of the MCU at all. The closest we've got is Doctor Strange, which is not occult, it's magic. There's a
Right.
difference. We're getting into,
Mystic.
like, Moon Knight, we're getting into vampires, we're getting into Black Knight. We
Exactly.
could be getting, like, a Doctor Voodoo in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Like, we could get some
Not
really
heard
cool
that yet.
stuff going on here.
Now, at first I didn't think it was
Could
either Nick
get. There's no
Fury.
confirmation.
Well, right. But I didn't think it at first. I didn't think it was either Nick Fury or Blade. I thought it was Dean. I think it was Dean Wright or Dean something.
Jeffrey Dean Wright.
Jeffrey Dean
Yeah,
Wright, the Watcher.
Jeffrey. Sorry. Yes. My
I
brother thought the same thing, and I thought that would be so cool.
That
Like,
would be
I'm really
so
looking forward to the
cool.
Watcher interacting with the live action
Oh,
MCU.
but then
Not
then
just
the,
anything from What If interacting with the
right.
live action MCU.
But then they just like, because then me and my friend were talking, like, if that is the Watcher, then that explains why What If seemed unfinished and why they had to cut one of the episodes and get it out now rather than wait a little bit. Because like for me, it felt like each episode should have been like 20 minutes longer to resolve more of the like hanging plot threads. Um, but again, that's
There's
just
another
me.
reason why What If seems unfinished as a show.
Well, yeah, because it's like just you're peering into a universe, but at the same time,
Because it's not finished! It's a 2-season show.
no.
They
I'm
haven't
talking.
released the second season.
No.
That's like criticizing Parks and Rec for not feeling done after season 1.
Well, hang on. No, I'm talking each episode like themselves, because like every episode was supposed to be,
Gotcha.
every episode was supposed to be like their own thing, with one character that would then get pulled from that universe. But for example, the zombies episode, I was really excited for What If Zombies, but it felt like half of an arc, and then that like how it was finished in the final episode, I felt it felt cheap, just like, oh hey, look, zoop, there they are, there's Scarlet Witch, they all just got killed. It just, I don't know, it felt like they didn't do the comic arc justice. And it also just felt like the episode should have been 20 minutes longer, because each episode was like 22 minutes, and for some of the arcs, I think 45 minutes would have worked like perfectly for what it was trying to do. At the same time, though, I loved What If just because it's Marvel. And that's going to be a theme that you see when it comes to me talking about Marvel movies. Is I love Marvel. That's just that's the whole thing. Even if a movie's bad, it's Marvel. There are not many movies that are like within the superhero branding entirely that I hate or that I do not like. One of them is the original Suicide Squad movie. But no, like knowing now that that was actually Blade talking, I am like really excited to see how this goes because this might mean that we're going to be getting the confirmation and the release date of the Blade film. We might like at Disney Plus Day. We might also have revealed then that Dane Whitman, Black Knight, is going to be in that show or in that movie. Which, if that's the case, then we might not see a Blade origin story outside of like flashbacks. We might just be introduced to Blade hunting vampires, which would be cool because that's the Spider-Man approach. Because personally, I don't think every character needs to have a full-on movie that's an origin story. I think it's good to just
Blade seems
introduce
like one
a
of those
character.
characters like he's a Dampier, all the benefits, none of the weaknesses. That's
Right.
all you need. You don't need to know the origin story to get into Blade. You can just like start a random Blade story and be like, "That's awesome." So how freaking cool would it be to have a Midnight Suns movie?
Oh, that would be really cool. But do you know exactly where Blade got his Dampier powers from? Do you know who gave them to him?
I vaguely remember, but it's like, oh, well, that's interesting trivia. It doesn't actually matter to me,
Well,
but it's interesting trivia.
Well, here's why it matters. Because he got his powers from Morbius, the living vampire, who's getting his own movie.
Oh.
And so the reason I say this is because there's a small chance that we get a Mahershala Ali cameo in Morbius, or more likely, we see Morbius in Blade, and Morbius bites Mahershala Ali's blade, and that's how he gets his Dampier powers. Because originally he was just a dude who fought vampires. Once he was bitten by Morbius, that's how he got his power. He became a Dampier, and that's where they went forward with that, which I think is really cool, especially with the fact that we're getting Blade very soon, and we're getting Morbius first, though.
Definitely excited for Blade. Definitely excited for whatever they happen to do with this Star Fox character. I do need to head out.
All right.
Is there anything you want to say to wrap up?
Well, really, it's just thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. It really helps us out. Our TikToks are down below if you want, to find my Instagram for some reason. It's also down there. Thank you for coming on, Hunter. It's an honor having you every single week. We will see you guys next week. Take care.